Hello, and welcome to the Feeling Good podcast, where you can learn powerful techniques to change the way you feel. I am your host, Rhonda Borowski, and joining me here in the Murrieta studio is Dr. David Burns. Dr. David Burns is a pioneer in the development of cognitive behavioral therapy and the creator of the new teen therapy. He is the author of Feeling Good, which has sold over 5 million copies in the United States and has been translated into over 30 languages. David is currently an emeritus adjunct professor of clinical psychiatry at Stanford University School of Medicine.
Hello, Dave. Hello, Michael.
Hello, David.
Hello, Michael and David. Here we are again, and welcome to episode 170. We're going to do some Ask David and a little bit of a follow-up from our last episode 169 on social anxiety.
And by way of explanation, we have not kicked out our beloved Rhonda, who's our host for the Feeling Good podcast, but our neighbor, Dave Fribush, has agreed so kindly to do 3 recordings today, which is Yom Kippur, the Jewish High Holy Days, and Rhonda couldn't join us for that reason.
So we miss you, Rhonda. I just wanted to start with a quick endorsement, David, that we've got from some of your many listeners. Here's someone who wrote, I purchased every single one of your books and I've read them all. Without them, I wouldn't be alive today. Thanks for your contribution to the mental health field. I can't wait for your new book.
Thank you. And I just sent the book today to the publisher. It's going to be published by PESI, P-E-S-I. And they're very excited about it. They haven't read it yet, so we don't know if they're going to like it or want to throw it in the trash, but they sent back 2 excited emails that they had received it. And we'll have to go through an editing phase and a marketing phase, but it is now officially in the pipeline.
It's great. Does this book have a name?
Let's see, what's it? Feeling okay? What was it?
Feeling decent.
Great. Feeling great.
Tony the Tiger. Feeling great. Great. You got...
And thank you for that, by the way, that wonderful email that was so kind for you to say those things. It means a lot. Means a lot to me.
Yeah, and another mental health professional wrote, if you are not a regular listener of the Feeling Good podcast, I cannot recommend it highly enough. David and Rhonda do incredible teaching, have great guests from the community, answer questions, and do live work. I routinely assign podcasts to my patients who find it super helpful.
And thank you so much for that. And by the way, we have more live work coming up, one that's already been recorded, but it'll have to be edited a little bit too.
Yeah.
But it's a woman, well, I guess I mentioned this a couple podcasts, but a woman who feels like she's not good enough, that there's something fatally wrong with her, that she's unlovable. And it's a very moving and amazing podcast. I'm sure you're all going to really love that one. But we got some good stuff today.
So just a quick follow-up from our last podcast when Michael Simpson, who's here with us today, was talking about social anxiety, and I after we'd stopped recording, I sort of made an offhanded comment. I was like, I think a lot of people can probably, I'm sure a lot of people can empathize with the feeling socially anxious. When I do, I've managed it with vodka.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. And then I had mentioned that research studies indicate that as many as 50% of people with social anxiety do medicate themselves with benzodiazepines or alcohol, and then get addicted to alcohol or benzodiazepines. So it's not. It's a pretty important issue. And the problem with treating any form of anxiety with alcohol or benzos, it actually prevents you from recovering.
Absolutely.
Because when you go into withdrawal, once you're addicted, when you go into withdrawal, you get intense anxiety and insomnia, and then you think, oh gosh, I'm not ready yet to go off, and then you take even more. And those addictions, especially to benzos, can be very difficult to withdraw from. Some people have said it can be as hard as withdrawing from heroin. although it can be done if combined with like team CBT or cognitive therapy or something of that nature. But that's why I've been so focused on developing drug-free techniques. And maybe that brings us to the Ask David question, which is about wellness and stuff like that. Yeah, Michael.
Just before we move on, because you brought up the last podcast and you drinking alcohol, I wanted to say that like I gave up drinking 4 years ago, basically like for work and focus reasons. But that is like a dramatic thing. If people have listened to the last one, that by not drinking, it makes these problems way more salient in your mind. And that's probably what led me to David, because probably if I just kept drinking, then they would have been covered up. So yeah, for me, it was like a really beneficial thing to stop drinking, but also like it meant I really had to face these demons head on.
And not only when you face the demons, I mean, not only does the alcohol prevent you from facing your demons and improving and recovering.
Especially with social anxiety.
Yeah, or with any form of anxiety, but also would have prevented you from having the wonderful relationship with Adriana when you first began to open up about your anxiety, and it prevents you from having not only improvement and recovery, but also intimacy and spiritual growth as well. I'm not promoting religion, but there is a spiritual aspect
definitely
to recovery.
Okay, great. Well, thank you both. So we're going to move on to an Ask David question. And it starts out, it's from Penny. Starts out by saying, I want to start by saying how much I love your podcast. It's helped me understand myself and has made me a much more effective counselor. I'm a drug and alcohol counselor working in Los Angeles, working primarily with women 18 to 25 years old who have aged out of the foster care system. They are an endearing group of women. However, their deep-seated beliefs of being unworthy of good things happening in their lives prevents them from attaining their goals of getting jobs, getting their children back, and gaining housing. These deep-seated beliefs are based on mistreatment by their families of origin and their subsequent experience in the social services system. Most were sexually abused or physically abused as children, taken out of their homes, then bounced around from one foster care family to the next. Despite my best efforts, the majority of these women go back out of the streets just shy of completing our 6 to 12 month treatment program. Once on the streets, they return to drug dealing, prostitution, and crime, after which, if they're lucky, they get picked up and incarcerated. Many die on the streets of drug overdoses or murder. I'm using all of the tools I can to help them change their core beliefs, but it is challenging to say the least. My question to you is there a book coming out which goes into depth about team therapy? I need to become the most effective counselor I can in order to help these women recover and lead normal lives. Thank you so much for your help. Keep up the good work. You're definitely saving lives.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you for that question, and I'll make my response, Penny, somewhat short, but just God bless you for doing the work that you're doing. Just healing and trying to save people's lives and souls, and experiencing probably a lot of heartbreak yourself when you see people you've poured your heart into dying or getting exploited and abused. It's pretty horrible. Just the new book that I mentioned at the top of the podcast, Feeling Great, will be coming out and soon, published by Pesci, and it does have all the new tools in it, especially the tools dealing with resistance, ambivalence about change, and how to motivate people. And that's what was really missing from the cognitive therapy package and from most other packages, that they have all kinds of methods to help people, but don't deal with people's ambivalence about, do I really want to change? And so Feeling Great will have all of that stuff in it. I also want to mention that we worked with this population in Philadelphia. I moved to an inner city hospital. It was in a gang warfare area, and none of our patients had insurance, and a lot of them were homeless and, like your patients, living on the streets. Many hadn't graduated from the 5th grade, and many of them couldn't read or write. And we developed an intensive cognitive therapy program for that population, and I wrote a book for that population called 10 Days to Self-Esteem. And we gave that to every person entering the program. And I wrote a second book, 10 Days to Self-Esteem, the Leader's Manual, to show people how to form these groups in inpatient settings or outpatient settings to work with this population. And the program was just tremendously successful. We treated everyone in groups, and we gave everyone at least 50 hours a week of therapy. We treated them all day, every day, learning the cognitive therapy tools as well as the communication tools. And there were also some 12-step sessions every day for them as well. Another thing for further training for you to learn how to set up these groups and how to use the older and the newer methods in an optimal way, you can go to my workshop tab at feelinggood.com, and there's a lot of workshops that I do, and you can sign up for them or read about them. You can also go to www.feelinggoodinstitute.com. I'm not officially affiliated with them, but I give them tremendous support, and they have all kinds of ongoing training, online trainings and treatment as well. Also, I don't know if you're familiar with my psychotherapy ebook that I don't market or promote very much, but everyone in our training programs is required to read it and do the things for homework, and that shows you how to do team therapy. You can find an order form for that on my website, feelinggood.com. Again, that's called Tools, Not Schools of Therapy. And maybe that's enough. I can give it just a brief vignette about like one of the women in our program. We treated them in a residential treatment setting. It was pretty much free for everybody. And I remember one day I was leading a group, and the nurses said, you're going to have this woman who feels that she's a bad mother, but we know her from the community, and she's a very loving mother. She's just perfectionistic and self-critical. And so when I led the group, she volunteered for the first demonstration, and her thoughts were, I'm a weak person because this is my second episode of depression, and I've had to be hospitalized. It wasn't like a real hospital, but it was an overnight facility that we created. And so my children will feel abandoned, and I'm a bad mother, and I'm a weak human being. Thoughts that anyone who's depressed can have. And then after doing a little empathy, I had her come to the center of the circle. I just used a real simple technique. I've got 50, 100 techniques, but she seemed like a kindly person. So I said to her, imagine there's a woman just like you sitting in the chair next to her. And it's her second hospitalization for depression. And she's telling herself, I'm a bad mother. My children will feel abandoned. I'm a weak person. And I said, just turn to her now and say that to her. And she said, well, I don't want to do that. And I said, well, why not? And she said, well, that would be very, very cruel. I wouldn't be that cruel to someone who's suffering. And I said, that's exactly right. But it seems to me that's what you're doing to yourself. You're talking to yourself in a very cruel way. But isn't it true? I mean, you have to speak the truth. Tell her the truth. Say, your children feel abandoned. Tell her that. And she said, I can't tell her that because it's not really true. I said, well, why not? She says, well, because my husband's taking care of them and they're doing just fine. And I said, well, but tell her she's a weak person because she got depressed again. Just say that to her. And she said, I can't say that either. And I said, why not? She says, because depression is an illness. It's not an issue of being strong or weak. Just be a cruel and just a mean-spirited way. And even the most strongest people in the world get depressed. Some of them even commit suicide. And then I said, well, tell her, what was her third thing? I'm abandoning. Tell her she's a bad mom. And she says, I can't say that either because she's a very loving mother. I'm a very loving mother. And then said, well, would you be willing to talk to yourself the same way you would talk to a dear friend who was just like you? And it's just like a light bulb went off in her head. All of a sudden, like pop. She said, oh, you mean I have the right to talk to myself in a positive, loving way? It's okay to do that? I said, absolutely. And then bang, she said, I'm feeling so much better. And I said, well, take the depression test again. And her score had gone to 0. And that all took about, 15 minutes or 10 minutes. It made for such a great group because then the others were saying, oh, can I have some of that good stuff too? But I loved working with that population. It was the easiest population I've ever worked with because the people were so grateful and so emotional. And sometimes when you work with the high-powered, intellectual, wealthy people, they're not so easy to work with. I don't know why it is, but I just loved working with homeless and people with few resources. It was so rewarding. They were just so open to everything because they'd never had anything. It's not like they'd fired 10 psychiatrists in the past. But anyway, I just thank you for your wonderful note, Penny.
Wow. Okay. So let's move on to a question. So I understand that a therapist named Georgina recently emailed you, David, and was pretty excited about her clinical work, which was dedicated to wellness and to holistic treatment methods. And it sounds like you mentioned in an email to her that you see it as intensely anti-wellness and anti-holistic.
Yeah, I'm anti-wellness, intensely anti-wellness and intensely anti-holistic. So I wrote her back and told her that.
Okay.
But not in a mean way, just...
okay. So she sounded shocked, is that correct?
Yeah,
okay.
Because she thought that this wellness and holistic stuff is just, better than French fries.
All right, so maybe give us a little more detail then on what this conversation, where it went.
Well, and I'll get you guys input. You can destroy me because I know you're both effectively into wellness and holistics. But my point is kind of a brief one. This woman, this therapist, Georgina, is doing beautiful work, and including with people with Parkinson's disease and getting them into moving their bodies and stuff like that. My father-in-law died of Parkinson's disease several years ago. It was a tremendous blow to our family, and it was a lot of suffering for him and for everybody. So my hat's off to her. I'll just say my premise very quickly. The idea of holistic medicine or holistic therapy and wellness is not new. It's just a fad that goes around every decade or so. It was very big in the 60s when I was a medical student at Stanford, and I loved Alan Barber, and he was the chief of outpatient medicine, and he worked with these people with so-called thick charts who had aches and pains that no one could diagnose. And one of his pet peeves is treating these people with holistic approaches or wellness approaches, which means like diet and exercise and vitamins and things like that, which have only a placebo effect. Now, a placebo effect can be a good thing, and I know I'm going to get attacked here in just a minute, but he helped them identify a specific, precise problem in their life that they hadn't dealt with. They went to the doctor to talk about pain, but they were really troubled sad about the loss of the wife or a troubled marriage. And when that was brought to conscious awareness, and then they made a plan for dealing with that problem, solving that problem, about 50% of them, their symptoms disappeared. And similarly, in the team therapy that I've created, we have the concept, and we've had podcast 130 on it, if you haven't listened on or are interested, on fractal psychotherapy. And what it means is that when someone is depressed, it's a very specific 1 or 2 or 3 related negative thoughts that are bugging that person. And they need to learn how to crush those thoughts to see that those thoughts aren't true, much as you've been doing, Michael, in testing some of your beliefs, that if people know you're socially anxious, they'll reject you, they'll judge you, that they won't find you acceptable. And so I use more than 100 techniques, and when I'm with someone, I want to help them with something very, very specific that's unique to them, and show them how to solve that very specific problem. And when that happens, generally all the problems disappear like a house of cards. And so that's what I'm committed to. And it bothers me a little bit when people get involved with buzzwords, and they think, oh, I'm going to treat everyone with diet and exercise, because it's not a cure for anything in psychiatry. You could, run from here to New York and back, and if you have a troubled marriage, you'll still have a troubled marriage. You need to learn, like in the workshop on Sunday, the 5 secrets of effective communication, to see what you're doing to your spouse that's triggering the conflict, and learn how to stop doing that and how to communicate differently. And that involves very specific training. Or if it's depression, it would be another very specific training. Now, all that being said, it can be a wonderful thing to exercise. And I know you, Michael, got up this morning at like 5 or something and went out running at high speed up one of the steepest hills in Los Alamos. The bends at the end of, you're speeding up that. And also, love certain health supplements and, shakes at health food stores that you swear by. And I know you too, Dave, are a tremendous athlete and love exercise. My daughter loves yoga and gets a lot of emotional benefit to it. So these things can be very emotionally beneficial. And anyone who wants to get involved with greater health and greater exercise, better diet, go for it. It's a terrific thing, but it won't cure, most psychiatric problems or psychological problems. All that being said, I'm now ready for assassination. You can shoot first.
Okay, so look, I agree with you. First off, I just want to. No, I was just going to do some 5 secrets.
Or you can do stroking if you like.
I've been trying to stroke you, but I'm finding it difficult.
Yeah, I know. I'm a blasphemer.
So I agree with you. That it is not a cure.
Yeah.
Meditating isn't going to cure your depression.
Right.
But that doesn't mean it's not going to make everything a lot easier.
Yeah.
So like in my own case with anxiety, with social anxiety, I find that when I exercise consistently, I'm on a good sleep schedule. I've cut out things like sugar and caffeine.
Yeah.
And I have these nutrient dense shakes every day, like kale, spinach, broccoli, turmeric, all that. It's not going to cure me, but boy, does it make it easier.
Yeah.
And that's valuable.
Yeah.
Like that, and that's valuable for everyone.
Extremely valuable.
Like my symptoms decrease a lot. Is it psychosomatic? I don't know. I don't care. And if
it's a placebo effect, what difference does it make?
That's what I'm saying.
If you believe in it and it's given a tremendous benefit in your life, then it's a great thing.
Like my social anxiety will go from like a 4 to a 2.
Yeah.
If I run consistently, and so awesome. So it's not going to take it to 0 consistently, but right. it makes me more able to like do the other things that will help me cure it. Like it gives me more mental bandwidth and emotional stability and calm to do other things like find the beliefs and conquer the beliefs and that kind of thing. Not to mention all the other benefits of like you're more present with your partner, you're more able to be with people.
And you have a beautiful lean physique.
Exactly.
And great energy and
right.
you look good
right.
and you're a muscle, a lively, vital muscle.
No, all that stuff's helpful. Like if you're suffering with depression, and you're physically fit, it's way easier than if you're suffering from depression and you're not physically fit, in my opinion. I don't know, but
that's true, and the research shows that exercise does have a placebo effect for depression, and a placebo effect means that maybe 40% of depressed people will feel significantly better. It doesn't outperform placebo, but it does have a fabulous placebo effect. And some people think a placebo effect isn't real or isn't trivial or it's like a bad thing. If placebo effect is real and it's extraordinarily valuable, much of what we do in psychotherapy is just a placebo effect. And what I'm doing in team therapy is trying to create mega placebos. And I know you're also got tremendous benefit from exercise, do tremendous bicycling, and have been a huge advocate of meditation too. So
yeah, I would. I mean, I would echo a lot of what Michael just said. That my experience has been that exercise does. I don't know whether it's placebo or not, but I will have a fundamental. I don't think it is,
Yeah.
but then it's how do you define the placebo, right? I have found like a significant shift in how after I exercise, like my way of thinking has changes.
Absolutely.
It's not permanent. I'm not saying that exercise is the permanent thing. To your point, the person running to from California to New York and back it's not going to affect. It's not going to save their marriage. But the conversation they're going to have is likely to go a lot better after that person's gotten their exercise than if he's, or she are feeling, antsy. And, look, I think that there's an addictive aspect to exercise. So maybe you get to a point like with someone like me who's been doing it for years that it's actually the lack of exercise is when I don't exercise, I'm having a withdrawal or something, and so the exercise
I wouldn't say that. I think if you're addicted to it, that's a fantastic thing, and it's a good thing to get addicted to.
I think I've been getting addicted, and I'm happy with that addiction.
But my experience is that it is very important, and also I think just feeling good, like feeling when your body feels good, like if I've exercised and stretched, and and my body feels good, like I generally am in a better mood, and it's not, and maybe it puts me in a better position to deal with the daily mood log or negative thoughts. But it's certainly not a cure-all. It's just I'd say for me it's part of I would say it's part of the cocktail of feeling good. So I guess
really
I would support the idea of wellness having a multifaceted approach, and maybe
absolutely
I don't know.
A good part of the puzzle. And then keep in mind that the exercise and diet might not be everything, and that there are other powerful tools. I'm reminded of a young woman who I didn't know, but I heard about it, was recently hospitalized in this area, was one of the world's top athletes, I think a gold medalist or something like that, and was about in a superb physical condition as can be imagined, and then just the last month or two sadly committed suicide, and what a devastating thing for her community, for her fans around the world, and for her family, for her therapist. So it's good that we've got as many tools as possible in helping people overcome these problems and find greater self-confidence and self-esteem.
Yeah.
And if these things are working for you as a part of the solution, by all means, go for it. We want to do everything we can to relieve suffering and to increase joy.
Right. Yeah, I think I think multiple times on hikes, you jokingly say, as the Buddha said, but I actually think that there is a convergence with meditation or mindfulness, and cognitive therapy. There's a lot of it.
I love that you say that, because one of the goals, and I don't know much about it, but I'm a good BSer more than anything else. But one of the goals of meditation is enlightenment. Well, enlightenment is also the goal of the technique externalization of voices with the acceptance paradox.
Right,
and what we're trying to do, and which we can make happen for many people, not for all, is bring about enlightenment in a matter of 5 minutes in a therapy session, and it happens over and over again. And I think that's the same goal. You don't have a self anymore, and you're not worried about your flaws, and you feel connected to people and feel joy. It's the death of the self. And we might do another podcast at some point too, if people are interested, or even a workshop, maybe a one-day workshop on the 4 deaths of the self. which, Buddha said there's a great death, but there's actually 4 great deaths available now.
Available now.
And then once you've done it, and
Buy
you
one, get one
recover,
free.
once you've died, you join the Grateful Dead. So it's kind of a cool thing. The act of dying is frightening, but once you're dead, and this is metaphorical because this is the death you can have when you're alive. It's more than just recovery from social anxiety or depression. It's like blistering joy, fantastic joy. It's like really fulfillment, and that's what I'm trying to bring about too with Team CBT, and it's very consistent with my understanding of Buddhism.
And I've definitely experienced moments of like these miracles happening, like just these moments of extreme connection through being open and doing some of the things Dave is teaching. I will say I do think when you use enlightenment like that, I think like the Buddhist concept of enlightenment is like different to the type of enlightenment that you're talking about. Like it's not quite the same concept. Like I think the Buddhist concept of enlightenment would be a much more like a pretty much more intense thing than like liberation from anxiety. But I see where
yes, it's not just liberation from anxiety, but it's going into a whole other dimension of joy, and liberation and freedom and love and connectedness to people. But there may be all kinds of Buddhist gurus sitting in a cave somewhere with yet even more spectacular versions of enlightenment. Mine are fairly humble and modest, but they're more than enough for me. That's for sure. So anyway, thank you everyone for listening today, and thank you, Dave, and thank you, Michael.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Michael, and thank you, thank you, David and Dave. Thank you, David, and thank you. Yeah.
Okay, and I guess we will have the lovely Rhonda back for the next podcast.
Yes, and then the last thing is if you're looking for training, go to my website, feelinggood.com, the workshop page. We've got a great workshop coming up, a one-day with my dear colleague Jill Levitt in January on overcoming therapeutic resistance. And if you like the podcast, please recommend them to your friends because you're our main source of marketing. So thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you.
Great.
This has been another episode of the Feeling Good podcast. For more information, visit Dr. Burns' website at feelinggood.com, where you will find the show notes for this episode under the podcast page. You will also find archives of previous episodes and many resources for therapists and non-therapists. We welcome your comments and questions. If you want to support the show, please share the podcast with people who might benefit from it. You could also go to iTunes and leave a 5-star rating. The theme music is Gypsy Jazz in Paris, 1935, composed and performed by Brett Van Donsel. I am your host, Rhonda Borowski. We hope you enjoyed this episode. I invite you to join us next time for another episode of the Feeling Good podcast.